Hello, and welcome to another episode of LSVT Global's podcast, Think Big and Loud, where we share inspiring stories, expert insights, and engaging conversations, all designed to empower and uplift the lives of individuals with neurological conditions and those who love and support them. My name is Beth Peterson, and I'll be your host for the show. In today's episode, we're exploring how LSVT BIG is helping people with Parkinson's move faster, steadier, and more confidently in their daily lives. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Barbara Doucet, Dr. Mark Blanchard, and Dr. Ingrid Franc. These are occupational therapists and researchers, and they're going to be sharing the outcomes of their recently published article on the science behind LSVT BIG, what bradykinesia or slowness of movement really feels like, and the powerful impact of regaining independence in everyday tasks. So thank you all for being a part of the show today. I'm excited to discuss the findings of your publication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, and to get started, I was wondering if each of you could tell us just a bit about yourself and what drew you to Parkinson's research.
My name is Ingrid Franc. I've been an occupational therapist for 39 years and relatively new to academia. I've been teaching for the past 7. My interest in Parkinson's disease research started when I was practicing actually in acute care, when I would have patients that had chronic diseases like Parkinson's disease. And in the acute care setting, they only want you to focus on what they came in for, which say for pneumonia. But I was never able to do that. I was always still looking at treating the movement disorder or working with them on a medication plan for at home when they get discharged, and to improve their timing of medication and things like that. But what really got me into Parkinson's disease research is an invitation by my then coworker, Dr. Barbara Doucet, to participate in a systematic review of studies that show the efficacy of interventions that occupational therapists can do to improve activities of daily living. And I'll let her explain more about that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you, Beth. I am so excited to be here. My name is Barbara Doucet. I am currently the program director for the post-professional program in occupational therapy at Baylor University. I got into Parkinson's. I have to toss it to Mark now, because when we were working together, as faculty, you're always wanting to provide your students with the state of the art and best practice. And we know some clinicians within our local community in the New Orleans area that were using LSVT BIG and really having some very positive, outcomes, and really enjoying what they were doing and seeing the changes that it could make. So Mark was really instrumental in starting to have the certification programs in LSVT BIG at our university. And we started offering that to the students. I got excited about it and started and went to my own certification, and then it became just part of our program and a really strong part of it. So that's what kind of initially drew me there.
Oh, great.
Hi, thanks. I'm Mark Blanchard, and I'm an associate professor at William Carey University in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I'm very fortunate to be here, and I appreciate you guys. I got interested in working with people with Parkinson's after about 25 years in a neuro setting. So I've always enjoyed that population. Always felt like occupational therapists could be impactful in improving their quality of life, their ability to be more functionally independent. So it was always an area that was motivated me very much. What drew me to this performing research was really to be able to quantify the magnitude and the importance of what different interventions, especially those interventions that are occupational based, motor learning based, and exercise based interventions can impact clients. And to be able to quantify that is probably one of the most important aspects of why I chose to, or why the Parkinson's population and this type of research is important to me and important to all three of us.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for the intros, and it's great to hear what brought you into the research. And I think with Dr. Doucet, I'll start with you. Before we really dive into the study, can you help our listeners understand what bradykinesia actually feels like? So maybe describes it in terms that we can all relate to.
That's a great question. And, quite truthfully, the people with Parkinson's are the best descriptors of that, right? Because we know that bradykinesia for a lay person might be, sound like a complex term, but in actuality, it's very simple. And I think you stated that at the beginning, Beth. It's slowness of movement, which is a common hallmark of Parkinson's. It is the feeling that they are moving against resistance. I had the best description of it by one of my patients that I was working with. And she said, Barbara, when I'm taking my shower and I'm starting to use my washcloth, I feel like I'm moving through sludge. Mm-hmm. Like I am literally trying to move against like soft clay. She said, it's the strangest feeling because I'm doing it normally, but it just feels like I'm pushing against this kind of sludge-like resistance. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful description. And that brought home to me immediately what it feels like for a person to have that slowness or the bradykinesia that we typically see with Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that's an excellent visual to think about so that we can all try to relate to that a little more. And so staying with you, what initially sparked your interest in studying whether LSVT BIG could impact the speed of daily activities rather than just a focus on the motor skills?
There's certainly a relatively large body of research with Parkinson's, and we have a lot of evidence that shows that exercise and engagement in movement types of activities have an impact on things such as posture or gait speed or walking or perhaps balance. However, there was very little research about whether or not improvements in those areas really translate to functional task performance, or what we as occupational therapists call ADLs, or activities of daily living. And I think all three of us are so function focused. We thought to ourselves, this is great. It's great, the body of evidence that's being built for LSVT BIG, but let's take it another step further and think about what impact it has on the actual task performance, the things that people have to do or want to do, rather than just looking at whether they can walk faster or if they're standing up a little straighter. At the end of the day, occupational therapists always say it's whether or not you can do the things you want to do that really make you healthy and give you quality of life. So we started talking about it, and that's where it all began.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how much of an impact can it really make on those ADLs, that activity of daily living? That makes sense. Yeah. Well, and Dr. Blanchard, I'll turn to you, and I'm wondering if you can walk us through what LSVT BIG actually involves. So for someone who's never heard of it, what would they see if they walk into a therapy session?
Sure. Yeah. When we think of LSVT BIG, we think of a structured, intensive type program that really addresses initially the amplitude of the movement, the speed, the power, the ability to make these larger movements. And so we're looking at all those aspects. And we're, from a standpoint of initially teaching someone to recalibrate that. What I mean by recalibrate is change the movement patterns from those slow movements that Barbara was able to describe, and to be able to make them more impactful, more intentional, and larger in scale, both larger in scale and more powerful to be able to do the functional things they need to do. From there, the initial focus is on teaching them those movements, and then that progresses to a recalibration into functional activities. So it's that intensive program, that 4 times a week, and so as 4 days a week. And so what we do is we see a progression that initially starts with just teaching and learning the bigness of the movements and how movements need to change. And then that's called a recalibration process. And that's really super important. At the beginning stages, we're just teaching the movement. And then as it progresses, then function starts to overlay. We start to take, as those movements become automatized, and when we call making these movements automatic, or calibration means that a person now is making larger movements without consciously thinking about it. And when that occurs and that sort of the switch flips, then we can start to apply it to functional activities they need to do every day. So applying it to function and in finding the things that are very meaningful and important to that patient, and then using that as the catalyst to getting that person more independent becomes the I guess the whole focus of that 4-week intensive program that's called LSVT.
Perfect. That was a great description. So thank you. Yeah, I think it
Sure.
really walked that through nicely. And Dr. Franc, I'm going to turn to you. And I know this study looked at 3 specific tasks. So putting on a jacket, putting on socks, and putting a pillow in a pillowcase. So can you demonstrate one of those for our listeners? What would we hear?
Yes, I'm just sort of going to recap a little bit about the study. What we were trying to see was whether the 4-week LSVT BIG program could improve the speed at which people could do ordinary tasks. And we chose those 3 tasks that Beth just listed because there are already standardized assessments for those 3 tasks, and they are things that the average American would do on a routine, if not daily basis. Putting on your socks, putting on a jacket, putting a pillowcase onto a pillow. And so we purchased these standard items, a standard jacket, standard socks, and provided them to the clinicians who were doing LSVT BIG in the New Orleans area, so that everybody had the same jacket, the same socks, the same pillow. And then we taught them, the therapists, how to actually do the tests. And they're all really simple, as you're about to see. I'm going to demonstrate the what we call the coat test, because I think it's the easiest one on this platform to show. So as I was saying, I'm going to demonstrate the what we call the coat test. And the therapist would have the client in front of them and essentially say the instructions I'm about to say. In this test, I will be timing you as you are putting on and taking off this jacket. I'd like you to put it on and take it off at a pace that would be considered normal for you. I'm going to start the timer as soon as you take the coat from me, and I'm going to stop it when you've completely removed the coat. You can complete this task sitting down or standing up, or a combination. You can start in sitting, and then if you want to stand, you may, or vice versa. So at that point, the therapist would then hand the client the coat, and the patient would literally put it on. They don't have to snap it or button it or anything. Then the therapist would cue them, go ahead and take it off. And as soon as it was completely off, the therapist would stop the timer and then record the amount of time that it took in seconds on the data collection sheet and in the patient's chart. And that's an example of how simple one of these 3 tests were. And all 3 of them are relatively quick and simple for the therapist to administer to the patients coming in for LSVT BIG.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That was really helpful to see. Well, and Dr. Blanchard, I'm curious about the emotional side. So when someone with Parkinson's can suddenly put their socks on 18 seconds faster, what does that mean to them psychologically?
Well, I think that in response to that, it's more about the individual. Each individual can perceive the importance of 18 seconds. For one person so in addition to the measures that you saw, there were some measures that you didn't see, and those measures being what's important, what are the goals of that patient. Every time we do LSVT, or when therapists do LSVT, they ask the patients what their meaningful goals or the important occupations that they need to do. But for those where one of those meaningful activities is to be able to get dressed more efficiently or improve that level of independence, and it's meaningful, important to that person, then we saw that became very impactful and empowering to them. For those, even they notice the differences in what they. That's what the therapist reported to us. So when we saw that it's impactful and meaningful, then the person often had a sense of improved self-efficacy, that they could do those things. On the flip side, one task, there was 3 tasks essentially that we did, and one of those tasks, whereas the first 2, the putting on the jacket and putting on the sock, those were activities that were often correlated to activities that they said were important to them. So in regards to that, we saw a correlation between those being meaningful and those being important. But on the other hand, with the pillowcase task, it was a little bit less connected to the goals of our patient. So we saw that improvements in all three. And so for those people who did not perceive, for example, one of those tasks to be important to them and to still be able to do these more efficiently, says a lot about just the generalizability of LSVT. That is, it has a carryover to activities that are important, obviously, but when we look at the data, we also say it also is impactful for things that weren't necessarily important, saying that calibration that occurs overrides the activities that may not have been perceived as meaningful and important. So I'm excited, and I see that the changes that a person makes and how it impacts them and how it's meaningful and important to them, and we see them with that improved self-efficacy. But I also think it's interesting that we see the carryover to tasks that aren't necessarily just a functional carryover to other activities. And so that's that's when I see the research, I see that's noticeable in both scales.
Well, that's great. It's not something I had thought about, and I think it goes back to when you were describing LSVT BIG, and a big purpose is that you want it to become more automatic, and I think it speaks to that. Yes, you want to do things that you like to enjoy, you want to get better at those, but some of the more mundane tasks, if it carries over there too, it can really have just a spread of effects all over. So thank you. That was a really insightful. And Dr. Franc, I was going to come back to you and ask about family members and care partners. So can you tell us about how bradykinesia affects their daily lives together?
Sure, yeah. I think I mentioned that much of my career was in acute care, but I also did outpatient rehab for 3 years and home health for 2 years. And it was really when I was doing home health that I saw how bradykinesia affects the family, in addition to the person with Parkinson's disease, when I was actually in people's homes and meeting them there. It would frequently take so long to do basic things like putting on a shirt or putting on your shoes that a family member would just sort of automatically step in and start to help. And I would realize that this could wind up leading to physical debilitation, because they're not being as active as they should be, but also to an emotional lack of confidence in what they can do for themselves. But for the family members, it was just hard to stand back and watch what they perceived as this painfully slow process. And then this would be exacerbated anytime that there's a time limit. If they're trying to get out the door to get to a doctor's appointment for a certain time, then all of that is, just exacerbated. It's just even that much more difficult. And then it even bleeds into just the fun things that you want to do, where getting ready to go out for a celebratory dinner out at night is loaded with the stress of having to build in so much extra time just to get ready, and to make it out the door into the car. And so the bradykinesia really did impact the whole family and the things that they would undertake and do, and how much joy they could find from doing the small things, the fun things, and the things you have to do, like going to see a doctor.
Yeah, well, that's also insightful. So thank you for sharing that perspective. And Dr. Blanchard, I was going to come back to you, and you kind of addressed this in the last time you were on, but did any of the results surprise you, or what challenged your expectations?
Yeah, that's exactly, I kind of gone back to the same thing, but we measure when you measure how a person improves those activities that are important to them. In addition to that, you're going to measure another construct, and that's going to be how satisfied are they with the level of improvement they made. That's a super important aspect of what LSVT or any intervention should focus on, is their perceived satisfaction with how the treatment went or the intervention went. And so this is a variable that wasn't reported, but it was certainly an important construct that needed to be looked at, is their level of satisfaction with the improvements they made. That when we look at, it's just a few seconds that increases a certain task, but to see that it's meaningful to them and they're way more satisfied with their ability to be able to do that is a more meaningful component, a more meaningful measure that really needs to be highlighted. And it's a significant part of what an intervention needs to look like, and a significant part of what I think this study focused on, is not only watching functional task performance, watching it improve, but how satisfying it was to a patient. Which this was a brief report, and we weren't able to highlight that so much, but I feel like that's an important aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, major life impact then. Yeah. Well, thank you. And Dr. Doucet, I was going to come back to you. So I know in the study you studied people across different stages of Parkinson's, so from very mild to quite advanced. Did you see any patterns of improvement?
It's interesting because, when all of us were in school, as you can tell, many of the three of us have been out of our OT education for several years now. But, we were taught that basically every Parkinson's patient has sort of the same symptoms, right? They all have tremors. They all have a stooped posture. They all may have this, this shuffling gait. And with the advent of more technology, more research, what has been learned is that, Parkinson is, the way it presents is in people can be very individualized. There are people with Parkinson's who don't have tremors, but might have impaired speech patterns. There's other people who have extremely poor posture, but don't have as much weakness overall. So the individual presentation of people with Parkinson's varies quite a bit. And because of that, it's sort of hard to predict sort of who will thrive or who might get better. That's nothing that any of us can definitively say. But what we saw in this study and in our work with it is that, through the LSVT program, they improved in those areas. And as Mark was saying, it's not only about improving the speed of movement, doing the things they want to do and need to do, and also having that satisfaction that they have improved. So again, that ties into quality of life and what's important to the patient, because our focus has always been about, getting people back to function. And the fact that we could sort of reveal that LSVT BIG really has an impact on the functional tasks. We know that the motor impairment skills improve. But, it was funny because when Laura and I were communicating, she said, "I'm so happy that you emphasize that LSVT BIG is not just about the big exercises," because people mistakenly think that's the whole core of it. But that other component of having the patient identify the tasks that are meaningful and important to them, and working with them on those hierarchical tasks, are the things that really help to get them back to doing things. So people progress different ways, but we were thrilled because overall our outcomes really were statistically significant. So that's always a positive thing.
Well, great. Well, thanks for that explanation. And Dr. Franc, the study was done during patients' medication on time. So can you explain what that means and why it matters?
Yeah, sure. Yes, the occupational therapists who were working with clients who were coming to see them for the LSVT BIG program, and including the ones who were involved in our study, would tell their patients to time their levodopa or their other medications to be active during therapy so that the person is able to move more easily. And as Parkinson's disease progresses, Many experience some low periods between the doses of their medication during the day that can impact their ability to move. It's important to work with your physician to minimize that impact, and also for the person with Parkinson's disease to adhere to a really strict timetable of when they take the medication to also minimize that. But we did, for the LSVT BIG program to be effective, it really does need to happen when not in one of those low periods in between doses of medication, but when the medication is in effect and at an active or on time.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. That makes sense. And Dr. Doucet, I was going to come back to you. I know that the research really bridges a gap between the motor improvements and actual daily function. So why do you think this connection hasn't been studied more?
Well, I think it's, as I mentioned before, the large amount of research that has been done looked at motor impairments specifically. And that seems to be what people think about when they think about Parkinson's. But we know from just neurological populations, the sort of $1 million question is you can have those improvements in specific motor skills, in strength, in balance, in posture. But we all think and assume that it automatically translates to functional task performance. And in actuality, it's not always the case. The motor feedback, the neurological pathways that are tapped into, the sensory feedback that's occurring during a functional task is very different than when we're just moving in sort of rote positions or just doing a test of strength or speed of walking. So it was very important for us to start looking at what we always look at is function. And as Mark had mentioned, it's important for us to quantify what we see and what we measure. So it was somewhat of a kind of a no-brainer for us, and because we saw it in some of the patients we had worked with. So we really wanted to measure and do a systematic study on it. And again, we're OTs and it's all about function. So this is near and dear to our hearts for sure.
Yeah, well, great. Well, thank you. And Dr. Blanchard, for healthcare providers who may be listening, how should this change their approach to LSVT BIG?
Well, I think it highlights the need to be able to not get bogged down so much with the large amplitude core exercises that are often focused on, and they need to be focused on until that calibration occurs. And also maybe for that focus to not be on those larger scale movements of thinking for a patient, I've got to address fall prevention and gait. Although it's very important for a patient to understand that hope is that they don't fall and they can walk better. But these aren't as quantifiable as them physically seeing themselves do functional activities and being able to improve the time it takes to do that. And so it becomes quantifiable in the fact that they could actually visibly see the time it takes and the decrease in potentially in time it takes for them to do those activities that are important and that happen in daily life. And so when you tell somebody, well, you're going to do this exercise so you don't fall, it's not a positive thing as much as it is to say you're going to do these exercises so that you can improve your speed at how you do certain activities that are important and meaningful to you. And so I think for clinicians and therapists, I think they shouldn't get bogged down with the large amplitude exercise. When your patient has that and they have proficiency with that and they can automatize it into daily task performance, then it needs to be done as fluidly and as quickly as possible and integrated into some of the functional things. Don't be afraid to integrate those functional things that are important to them. And for a patient as well, it's important to be able to go in, walk in the door at LSVT and say, these are some of the things that I want to be able to do better to prepare, like you would if you went to a doctor's office and say, these are the things I want to get better. Often therapists get bogged down. They spend a few weeks working with a patient before they realize what's really meaningful to them as they get to know them. And certainly to be able to get that right initially becomes important, and it becomes important for therapists to be able to start that process in the evaluation process to understand, and then also as the progression of the as the treatment goes. So for the therapist to be able to try to jump into the functional things early in the LSVT process is probably one of the big takeaways I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. I think both the clinician and the patient end on that. So thank you. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Franc, so for someone who's been diagnosed with Parkinson's and might be listening to this, what would you want them to know about LSVT BIG?
I would want them to know that they're going to get a lot more out of it than just going through some exercises. Although the exercises are upbeat and fun, but the program is also tailored to them. So they'll work on specific tasks that they find frustrating or are slow at, or maybe they even need help with it. So they'll identify tasks, specific things that they want to improve on, and that's going to be incorporated into it. Mm-hmm. I also want them to know that they'll be taught a set of exercises that can literally remain with them through life. Like when they hit a bad patch, and if they can't do those exercises in the exact same way that they did them a year earlier, then they can sort of return to LSVT and they can be modified and just tweaked a little bit and still will work for them. And so it just becomes like part of the routine and part of what it becomes second nature and just part of healthy living for them, and can literally stay with them for life. And the last thing I'd want them to know is, of course, that as our study showed, that by the time you finish the 4-week LSVT BIG program, you will probably be faster and more efficient at getting things done that you need to do and want to do. And sometimes improving the speed of things you need to do means there's more time to do the things you want to do. You know, we don't all want to spend like 10 minutes just getting dressed, or longer, depending on the situation. So that would be the things I would want people to know about LSVT BIG. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, I forgot one thing is about the BIG for life. That after you finish the 4-week program, you might have a community where there's a BIG for life group afterwards that you could join. And that's another real positive, because that's done in a group setting, which is inherently sort of more fun than just doing things on your own. And then you'll meet other people with Parkinson's disease and make connections and friends and share information.
Great, thank you. Those were all great points. And I'm really sensing the theme of making sure that patients know, yes, you're doing big exercises, but the point of those is they're going to improve function and things that you need and want to be doing. So thank you. And I was going to ask a little bit about future directions. So Dr. Blanchard, I'll start with you. I know you've called this preliminary work. So what would be your dream follow-up study, or what would that look like?
Yeah, thank you. This is what we did was we called a retrospective study. So we looked back at, we with student assistants, we trained therapists. We told them, hey, this is a measure that we can use. Timing, we found, was if we're going to address bradykinesia, the speed of doing something, then timing made the most sense. And so we said, we're going to time this before, we're going to have you time it after, and just send us the results. So we didn't really have any ability to impact any variables other than how the tests were administered. And so when you have retrospective data that you're just pulling in from all the sources that we trained, we're not sure. We didn't really have any control. We didn't have any really quality to be able to look at and see how was the therapy delivered. So we don't know that specific. Our hope is that it was delivered in the same uniform way at LSVT is typically delivered. And by the fact that they did LSVT training does allow us to think that that's the way it happened. Mm-hmm. But certainly we'd like more control, and also to have a group to test this against. So you would like to have a prospective study as opposed to a retrospective study, one we can look forward to, and then have a group that we would focus on, and then another group would be a control group who maybe didn't get that same intervention, to see if the effectiveness, to see what degree of the effectiveness and what's the degree that the bradykinesia changed if they got one treatment versus another. So those are things we would like to have done or would like to do moving forward. In addition to that, there's so many other areas that we explored in this brief report that looking at the importance of meaningful occupations and their ability to do that. We're all occupational therapists. So to see the attachment of meaningful things and important things to a person's quality of life, their satisfaction with the way they do activities, and the speed and the amplitude of how they do those things and how that impacts it becomes important. And so studies that can reinforce or look at that would certainly be things that we're interested in moving forward.
It sounds like you have plenty that you want to look into. So thank you. And Dr. Doucet, if you look ahead 5 or 10 years, how do you see occupational therapy for Parkinson's evolving?
I'd love to see more therapists know about LSVT BIG. I know there is a huge worldwide community of therapists that have been trained and certified in LSVT BIG, but it's one of the few therapeutic interventions that there's a fair amount of research on between the LSVT BIG and the LSVT loud outcomes that have been seen. For us as therapists, we have to, ethically provide evidence-based care. So we are looking for research that supports what we do with our patients. We don't want to be using ineffective interventions. So in that way, I would love to see the literature within occupational therapy and Parkinson's expand to do more of these functional measures, because we need this. We need this evidence that validates what we do, validates that we are essential in getting people back to doing the things, again, that they want to do or need to do, and drawing that connection, because I know I sound like a broken record, but, being able to do the things we love to do, sitting on the floor, playing with our grandchildren, cooking a meal for our family, diapering a child. Those are the things that in the long run give us our quality of life and keep us healthy. So I would like to see certainly more research being done with occupational therapy outcomes in Parkinson's, looking more closely, as Mark mentioned, more control studies, looking at the ADL outcomes after LSVT BIG would be very helpful.
Well, great. Well, it sounds like a nice direction to keep going. Well, and I'd love to have each of you provide some advice or takeaways for different audience members today. So I think I'll start with you, Dr. Franc. And if someone listening has just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, what would you want them to know about maintaining their independence?
When I was thinking about this question, it brought me back to that systematic review that Barbara and I did, which basically the evidence points to physical activity as having the biggest impact on independence in your basic activities of daily living. We found that resistance training alone does not have much impact, but instead what's called multimodal exercise, basically activity that would include balance challenges, stretching, moving, and strengthening all. And so basically things like LSVT BIG, though that's not, the only things. There's also other Parkinson's specific exercises out there, dancing or boxing, that would also work. But that physical activity is probably the biggest thing. The other major way of advice I would give is to keep doing what you can do. Just simply keep doing what you still can do, keep doing. And you may have to gently, ask the people in your life to back off sometimes to help you be able to continue, keep your own strength and up for doing things that you can do for yourself. And the last thing is really not really for somebody who's just been diagnosed, because someone who's just been diagnosed won't need any kind of assistive device for anything. But later, as the disease progresses, this may become an issue. And I feel like society has come a long, long way in accepting the use of assistive devices if it means that you can maintain your independence. When I first became an OT in 1986, my patients then, who were in their 80s and 90s, would simply not leave the house if it meant they had to use a cane. They just wouldn't do it. I saw that attitude really shift through the decades, and the baby boomers will do what they don't care about if someone perceives that they look weak or something for using a cane. They'll embrace that cane rather than stay at home. They want to keep doing the things they want to do. I love that shift in attitude. And I would just, if a listener maybe was raised in that older frame of mind, I would encourage them to reflect on that and maybe make a conscious effort to sort of reject that older frame of mind about the place of assistive devices in maintaining your independence.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think that's great advice across the spectrum with Parkinson's. And Dr. Doucet, for family members and care partners who might be listening, what advice do you have for them if they're supporting someone going through LSVT BIG?
The first thing I would say is, as a care partner, which I am one of those because my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 7 years ago, is to first, be the support for them that they need. And that psychosocial support and essentially being their biggest cheerleader throughout the process. It's a journey. But one of the things that is really important, I think, for all caregivers to understand is that you see sort of the manifestations of Parkinson's through, motor difficulties and, slowness of movement and all those things we talked about. But it's the things you don't see you have to be very aware of. We're all well aware now with the research that is available that there are lots of non-motor, emotional, cognitive changes that go on with the diagnosis. So it's not just a motor disease. So being aware of that, looking out for symptoms of depression or anxiety or isolation, just the fact of people removing themselves from social activities or disengaging in activities that they previously loved could be a huge red flag. So it's important to not only be that supporting partner, but also to recognize that it is a full body disease, body, mind, the whole shebang. So to be aware of that and be supportive, to always encourage movement. Ingrid and I talked about that in the systematic review. What we know about this disease is just movement and getting out and getting that heart rate up a little bit can have tremendous effects. So sort of being the coach as well to say, okay, let's go walk today. Let's go do our walk. Let's get our steps in can be a huge help as well.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Blanchard, what's one key message you hope our listeners today will take away from the research?
So one of the key areas that I think is important for our patients is to keep themselves going. Is Barbara really, she really highlighted the importance, the ability to have social and peer interactions and to continue moving forward. And remembering that recovery and improvement and all those things is not exercise based. It's in you engaging in the things that are important and continuing to reinforce those type of activities. The more we're bogged down with worrying that we're not getting enough exercise. Exercise encompasses all those things, all those important activities that we do. They're ADLs, they're self-care that we choose to do. So those are important aspects, as well as seeking the social groups and support systems that can help you to reinforce that and to keep you from some of those non-motor symptoms that Barbara highlighted. So I think that's probably the main message I'd like to get across.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think that's really helpful advice. So from all of you, and I was just going to ask a final question, and maybe you touched on it before when you were talking about future research, but what's next for each of you in your own research? And Dr. Blanchard, if you want to go ahead and start.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate enough to just start a new program, a new occupational therapy program. So a lot of my focus has shifted away from a research focus that That being said, Parkinson's research, the ability to be part of the Parkinson's community is just an important part of my life, and it has been for a good while now. So I anticipate continuing to do that, and that becoming a real big part of my research agenda as we move forward. But I haven't really defined that quite yet, for sure.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to it, whatever it looks like. Thank you. And oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I am so excited because in July of this year, I was awarded a community grant from the Parkinson's Foundation. And it's interesting because this year they wanted to focus on mental health and the involvement of caregivers. So Mark is also a co-investigator with me on this project, and Ingrid's well aware of it too. She had some input going into it. And what we did was we created a weekly walking group that also serves as a support group. So they can connect with each other. We can build relationships. It is a way to keep them from isolating themselves, to get them to re-engage not only in our weekly walking and support group, but to use that as the impetus to get out more, to get back into the community. So we have had it for a couple of months now. We have a great little group. We're trying to recruit more people, but what we're finding is that the connection and the ability to speak with others who are in the same situation. The caregivers the care partners are also involved. So they bring spouses. One week we had grandchildren, we had dogs, and just that connection and that presence of being with others has been so therapeutic from what we've seen thus far, and it's going to continue for several months. So more to come on that one, but it's the exciting next chapter for us, because what we do is research as clinicians, and at the end of the day, we want to provide our patients with a better life. And we do that through how we interact with them, and in the process, collect data and make it research.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Well, congrats on that funding. It sounds like a really impactful study that you're doing. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And Dr. Franc, I'll give you the last word there.
Okay. Well, here at LSU Health New Orleans, the Department of Occupational Therapy, we still are maintaining our relationship with a local Big for Life support group. And one of our other faculty members, not me, but one of my other faculty members is looking at a project on whether LSVT BIG has an effect on self-esteem. So I think that would be another retrospective. That'll be interesting. I'm working on another project involving one of the 3 tests that we used with this one, the specifically the one that we call the SOC test, and sort of doing some further validation with that in acute care settings. And then finally, the last thing I'm doing, it doesn't have anything to do with Parkinson's disease, but it does have to do with chronic disease, which I had said was my interest area. I'm working with the Department of Nephrology here at LSU on developing assessments to determine the readiness of someone with end-stage renal disease to complete their dialysis at home as opposed to in a dialysis center. So that's what I've got going on here at LSU Health New Orleans.
Well, great. Well, thank you. You're all very busy and making a big impact in your communities. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Beth. This has been wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity.
It has been. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm going to just wrap up with some final credits to make sure I give credit where it's due. So again, a big thank you to each of you. Your passion is evident, and we thank you so much for the research you've done, the time you put into it, the research you continue to do, taking the time here today. So we appreciate it. I know those in the audience, those with Parkinson's that are going to benefit from your research, really appreciate it. So thank you so much. And I just was going to let our listeners know that the article, I'm going to put the citation to the article in the show notes so that you can find that citation, and then also a link to the article so you can review it more in depth, which I would encourage you to do. I also want to mention the theme song that you hear at the beginning and end of our podcast, and that's called Think Loud for Parkinson's by Kindred Spirit and Leo Sayer. And it was a song and video inspired by LSVT Loud speech treatment. and it was developed to raise awareness for Parkinson's worldwide. It's available for download and streaming on all major music platforms, and proceeds benefit the UK charity Cure Parkinson's. I'll put a link to that video in the show notes as well. I also want to thank our production team, CS Design Studios. They help make all the behind the scenes work possible and to get our podcasts up and running. If you're interested in learning more about LSVT Big physical or occupational therapy, or LSVT Loud speech therapy, or if you want to locate therapists in your area, you can visit our website at lsvtglobal.com. And I'd encourage you to click subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. And I look forward to thinking big and loud with you again next time. So thanks for joining us.